Yeah, so I was at Amazon a long time ago. I launched and scaled the marketplace business. So the marketplace business is third parties selling at Amazon.com. That's over 50% of all units ordered and shipped today on Amazon. And I also ran enterprise services, where we ran other large retailers, e-commerce infrastructure for them. So Target, Toys R Us, Marks & Spencer in the UK, a number of other great brands. I left Amazon in late 2005, started working with clients, and it was several years after I left Amazon, a client of mine at the Gates Foundation actually pulled me aside one day and he goes, John, you know, you do a really nice job of taking the little strategies and the mechanisms, the things you would do at Amazon to get results and inserting them into our work. And I think you ought to write a book. And I was like, Greg, I'm an engineer and I can barely do PowerPoint anymore. And so the smartest thing I ever did was I talked Greg into being my partner on these books. But everything I do, my books, my client work, coming and talking to you, I want to tell you it's not about Amazon, it's about you. And what can we take from a company like Amazon to evolve our approaches so that we can compete and innovate better? Does that sound good? Does that sound good? Perfect, right on. Okay, first, let's talk about the word leadership. You know, we all know it when we're around good leadership. You're all proven leaders. You wouldn't be in the roles that you're in if you're not. But I think it's a word that we kind of let slip by a lot, right? Like we get kind of lazy around it, right? So what is the word leadership? Like if you had to define it. Fortunately, I have a definition with me. So, thank you. So what is leadership? Leadership is a practical skill encompassing the ability of an individual, group, or organization to lead, to influence or guide other individuals or organizations. Scholars define leadership as a process in which a person enlists the aid and support of others in the accomplishment of a common task or mission. So what happens if the task or mission changes? What if we need to evolve, to innovate, to compete differently? Well, then we need to think about some new tactics, some new processes, some new leadership mechanisms in order to accomplish that mission. So let's talk about a few of the things that I think we can borrow from Amazon to incorporate into our own companies. So first, the customer. Right, Amazon has 14 leadership principles. The first is called customer obsession, and it reads like this. Leaders start with the customer and work backwards. They work vigorously to earn and keep customer trust. And while they pay attention to competitors, they obsess about customers. I think the most interesting word in that leadership principle is the word obsession, right? We could have picked a more comfortable word, an easier word, like we're focused on our customers, we're in touch with our customers. But instead we chose, and we use this word a lot, we picked a pungent word, right? A word you know when you're around it. When you're around somebody who's obsessed with something, right? Maybe a football team, I've heard there's a few down here in Florida, right? When you're around somebody who's obsessed about something, what are they like? They're irrational, right? They spend time, money, resources, cycles on things that you just flat out don't understand, right? You can't get your head around why are they so in tune and focused on this. And that is exactly what Amazon's wants their competitors and others to say about them relative to the customer. They use this principle as the permission slip. It's the fabric that gives them the ability to do anything on behalf of their customers. And I think if you look at the now 25, 27-year journey of Amazon, they've basically been using this principle as the fabric to continue to expand into customers' lives. So, great principle. What are some ways that we can start building more customer obsession in our organizations? Some real simple habits make real big impact here. Start every meeting, start every email, start every discussion with explicitly who's the customer and why does this topic impact them? And if you do that little habit, everybody does it, guess what? Over time, it's just the way that we talk and we think and we build that obsession. So think about incorporating who the customer is explicitly and why does this matter to them, and you're on your path towards building customer obsession. So, Amazon's most important innovations, what would you say they are, right? So a lot of people might say Alexa, maybe if you're into technology, AWS, Amazon Web Services, a bunch of other cool things going on. I like to go into what I call the Wayback Machine, right? Late 1999, 2000 era, and talk about some of the things that Amazon did. Let's talk about some crazy innovations from Amazon. First, free everyday shipping, right? Right, exactly. Launched in 2000, guess what the market reaction was to free everyday shipping? Unsustainable. They don't know retailing. They won't be able to stay at it. Next innovation, authentic customer reviews. Amazon was the first company to launch with authentic customer reviews. Guess who hated it? Brands hated it, right? What if a customer writes a negative review? Amazon's bet was that if customers trust what they're buying more, over the long term, they're going to buy more. Look inside the book. Anybody here ever used look inside the book at Amazon, right? It lets you read substantial portions of a book without even buying it, right? Without even buying it. Guess who hated this? Publishers hated it. What if they don't buy the book, right? Again, Amazon's bet. If customers trust what they're buying before they buy it, over the long term, they will buy more. And then the last example I'll use is the marketplace business. That's the business that I launched. A couple of key lessons from that. First, that was the third iteration. In 2002, as early as that is in Amazon's life cycle, it's the third iteration of a third-party selling strategy. I faced enormous internal resistance and competition from that. First, because we had tried it a third time. We had tried it twice before. Why is a third time going to make any difference? And the second was, I was introducing sellers that were going to compete with Amazon merchants, right? We were going to compete in books. We were going to compete in electronics. We were going to compete in home. So what are the lessons that we can take from this? First is that most of these are not really technical innovations by themselves, right? They're more or less something that benefits a customer and it changes a business tradition, and that inherently makes people uncomfortable. The second is you have to be willing to stick with it for a long time. Today, we can't imagine a world without free everyday shipping, right? Most of us expect free reverse shipping, right? But at that point, it sounded ridiculous, right? It sounded counterintuitive. Bezos always says, if you're going to innovate, you have to be willing to be misunderstood, oftentimes for long periods of time. And so that's the last point is, it does take time for customer adoption to happen. So think about, what are the conventions in your business that don't favor the customer, that aren't really technical in nature, that would bring more trust for your customer, and make the bet that over time, if it benefits the customers, you and your partners will win big time. So next one. So all of this energy and tumult is built around this aspect of digital, right? Digital disruption, digital strategies. Who here has a digital strategy in their organization? Raise your hand if you have a digital strategy in your organization. Interesting, right? So again, I like to unpack words. Like what do we actually mean when we say we want to become digital? Like what will it feel like? What will it be like when we're actually digital? I think being digital is two core attributes of an organization, something that both their customers would say about them, but also their competitors would say about them. And here's the two attributes. And they're both athletic attributes, but they are actually organizational attributes too. The first attribute of being digital is speed. If you think about what speed is about repetitive motion, being able to do predictable things with high efficiency, with high definition, using lots of data, right? You have to be efficient at it. This is about operational excellence, right? The companies that are going to compete and innovate have to be excellent at operations, and they have to know how to scale, something we're going to talk about. And the second attribute, while it sounds the same, it's actually distinctly different, is the attribute of agility. If you think about what agility is in an athlete, it's the ability to sense and make small and big changes, right? That's what agility is. And so an organization has to be able to sense something and be able to make change happen, both small and big change. And it's not enough to be just one of these anymore. To be a digital organization, you have to have both speed, you have to have operational excellence, and you have to be agile. You have to be able to make change happen on a repetitive basis. So let's talk more about speed and agility. So this is a picture of a partnership that was in Germany several years ago now. It was a partnership between Amazon, DHL, and Audi. And what this partnership did was it allowed a customer to order an item and have it delivered to the trunk of their car without specifying where their car was. Right? What a great use case, an obvious use case. Like, really? Like, nobody else has thought about that? It was a beta partnership. Amazon's pulled it back, but they've been launching with a number of OEMs here in the US around similar capabilities, right? The future has lots of new use cases. A lot of these use cases are going to go across multiple products and multiple services, which means they're going to go across multiple enterprises. So we all have to get good at the stuff that goes into these types of use cases. Things like real-time APIs and data that lets us connect and operate. Things like the legal and business terms that go into making cases like this. We have to get good at seeing things like this. The second lesson from this is, while I'm sure the finance organizations at Amazon, at DHL, at Audi tried to make a business case for this, you can't really make a business case for this, right? Why? Because you're guessing at it. You don't know what adoption is going to be. You don't know what the reaction is going to be. You don't know what the efficiency factors are going to be. You don't know anything other than it sounds like a really good idea, right? Sounds like a great use case. So we called these things bets at Amazon. And we use that word to recognize that this is something different. We don't understand it, but we think it's a really good idea. If you put all of your good ideas, your bets, in with all of the other things you could do, the programs, the integrations, the projects that you can do, and you line them up only by business case, how well you understand the business case, guess what happens? You never get to these things. You never get to bets in your organization. So we're going to talk more about bets. But I think it's a really important notion if you're going to try new things. You have to recognize that they are distinctly different types of ideas than your well-understood concepts. But here's the last lesson to take from this, is Amazon, a company that is famous for great customer experiences, isn't resting on their laurels. In big ways and small ways, they continue to innovate the customer experience. And my guess is if Amazon can do it, most of us can do it too. So let's talk about metrics, right? I give whole workshops just on this topic. If you ask me, John, what is your memory of life at Amazon about? It's about metrics. So a few things that I think Amazon does really well around metrics. First, we would spend more time when we were going to launch a new product, launch a new service, launch a new geography, launch a new category. We would spend more time defining what the metrics would be than we would actually what the new service, what the project was that we were launching. Why would we spend more time debating what the metrics were than actually what the specifications of the project were? The reason why is twofold. First is we knew no matter what we did coming out of the gate, it was never going to be the end game, right? It was never going to be good enough. But if the team had the right metrics, the right feedback relative to it, guess what? They were going to have the information, the vital feedback in order to evolve it. And the second thing is that if we spent time up front debating what those metrics were, we wouldn't have to pay as much attention to it as a leadership team going forward. We could let the team proceed more nimbly, more agilely, with more speed, because we knew they were measuring the right things. So that's one lesson, right? Spend more time debating what your metrics actually are. The second thing is, metrics sounds like a noun, but it's actually a verb, right? So metrics are about gaining insights and making change happen. So the entire cadence of your week at Amazon was about going to metrics meetings. You'd typically start on Monday with the distributed teams. By Friday, you were rolled up to the worldwide organizations, right? Every meeting would have a set of stakeholders debating a consistent set of metrics. What went right, but more what went wrong, and what were we going to do about it? It was all about accountability and action. What didn't work right? What are we doing to solve it?
I get asked a lot, like, John, what was it really like working at Amazon? And there's lots of ways that I can reflect back on that, some high points, some low points I'll talk about. But the thing that I come away with mostly was, it is a culture of metrics. When you are in corporate, the everyday rhythm of the business was this thing called metrics meetings, right? So on Monday, it'd be the small teams. By Friday, it would be the worldwide meetings. And guess what? Back on Monday, you go back to that same set of meetings. Metrics meetings brought together typically a consistent set of people to digest a set of metrics about the business, about the customer experience, about operations. A couple of key lessons to take from this. First is, we always spent more time talking about how are we going to measure something broader than just our product and service, right? How are we going to measure something as much as we did what was the actual product or the service, right? We spent more time debating the metrics as the design of the product or service, because we knew no matter how good the product or service was that we went out with, it wasn't going to be right, it wasn't going to be perfect, it wasn't going to be done. But if we instrumented the experience correctly, then the teams had the fuel, had the data in order to iterate towards perfection, right? So spend more time on your metrics. Secondly, your metrics are never done, right? So every time you're getting together to talk about an issue, an incident, something that happened, you always need to sit back and reflect. And it's like, did we have the right metrics for all of that? You always need to be deepening your metrics and designing your metrics. When I work with clients on metrics, they always have this mindset of like, I want a green, yellow, red indicator. And secondly, we've got 2 weeks and then our metrics are done, right? And it's like, whoa. We don't even start with that. Like, your metrics are never done. And finally, I always like to talk about metrics are a verb, right? Like, they're not a thing, they're a verb. They're about action and insight. Every metric at Amazon has a name by it, right? That person never owns all the operational or organizational things that it takes to influence that metric, right? A person owns that metric, and the culture, the name of the game is, when somebody comes to talk to me about a metric that they own, guess what? We all work for that person, right? We all work for that person because they're working towards an outcome, not an organizational structure, not a seniority, not a position. We work for outcomes, and our metrics are the best indicator of what those outcomes are in our pursuit of perfection. Which finally gets to, again, helping to avoid the organization structure, names, titles, seniority, things that don't matter to customers and outcomes. What matters is, how are you performing today? So I got to travel a bit with Bezos relative to when we were in the enterprise business, and I remember a discussion he was asked once, like, well, how does Amazon decide what to innovate on and everything? He goes, well, that's a really tough, good question, but he goes, at the end of the day, I like to think about durable customer needs. And if you can understand your durable customer needs, those things that won't change over time, that can give you good kind of swim lanes in which you think about, where do we invest, where do we innovate? And he goes, I believe in 3 durable customer needs. And he's thinking about his retail business at this point, right? He goes, I believe in 3 things. First is a customer will never want a higher price. Second, a customer will never want less selection. They'll never want fewer choices. And third is a customer will never want slower delivery. And so I believe that those are the 3 durable customer needs that I'm going to continue to invest in. And if you think about the history of Amazon over the past 25 years relative to the retail business, you see them like they kind of stick in those 3 swim lanes, right? How to lower prices, how to add more selection, and how to make delivery and service more flexible, and they continue to keep in those. So if you can decide what are our durable customer needs and use those as swim lanes, as guidelines to help try new things, even when those things don't pan out, guess what? They are aligned to your durable customer needs, and you're going to learn better from them. Amazon is a culture of writing, right? And so all ideas, all proposals get thoroughly written out and debated before we proceed on them. And that's one of the reasons why I think Amazon, they make very good and deliberate decisions at the senior level. We're doing this, we're not doing that, right? The strategy is the deliberate process of what you say yes to, and more importantly, the things you say no to. Because there's always more smart things that you can do than you can possibly afford to do. And I believe that diluting the couple of things that you intentionally decide to do with proceeding on things that you didn't deliberately say no to is one of the leakages, one of the dilution factors that happens in most organizations. And the second aspect of writing out ideas fully in narratives, in future press releases, in FAQs, in user manuals, before you build anything is that teams make better decisions. They have clarity. Clarity is both simplicity and completeness of thought. And when you get to clarity, then you can better decide, well, what's the most important hypothesis? How do we test on it? How do we proceed on it? How do we build to just the minimally viable thing that we need to test out next? And so it is definitely a go slow to go fast approach of writing out ideas. But it's why I think a company like Amazon then proceeds on the execution and testing path so well is because they've done the hard work of thinking about it and as teams getting together and exactly understanding what it is we're deciding to do, what we're saying yes and no to, and how to proceed on our testing and development around that. So everybody here has heard of AWS, right? Amazon Web Services, big cloud leader, right? So in holiday 2003, we had a really rough holiday season. The website kept tipping over. We couldn't handle the traffic and domain. At that time, all teams owned their own infrastructure, right? So you owned server forecasting, server provisioning, server operations, all of those things. And we came back from holiday 2003. We were like, this isn't working out. And so we decided to centralize infrastructure, right? And the infrastructure teams work great. We'll provide you interfaces so that you can self-service and manage your server provisioning, operations, and things like that. And what we decided was, that is great, but here's the problem with just having internal customers. We all want to get along, right? We're all friends, we're all colleagues. We're going to externalize it. We're going to have external customers, because external customers are always discontent, right? External customers are more demanding. And we stumbled into this incredible business that is now AWS. So think about, what are your core capabilities, the things that you absolutely need to be world-class at? And ask yourself, what would it take in order to create a service that is self-service, that others could use without having to come and talk to me, that I could offer competitive features, competitive rates, competitive SLAs, right, service level agreements on. And even if you decide not to proceed on that platform strategy, what you'll do is you'll come up with a set of ideas and feedback about how do we take what we think, what we perceive to be our world-class capabilities and actually make them better. And that is where, again, so many of Amazon's ideas have come from, is thinking about what are the things we need to be world-class at. How do we build tools for ourselves, but we're going to externalize them, partially because there's a business opportunity there, yes, but also it makes the service and makes the capability better. So Amazon deeply believes in entrepreneurships. Again, the biggest concern, the biggest paranoia at Amazon is becoming a bureaucracy. And so what they believe in small teams, right? And so these small teams, not every team is organized in this way, but one type of small team at Amazon is called a two-pizza team. A two-pizza team, a team no bigger than 10. The ideal size of a two-pizza team is one person. A two-pizza team owns a core service. It could be something that is on the website, like the image service or the payment service or the promotion service, or it could be a core back office capability, right? Like item forecasting, inventory receive, capabilities that you have to be world-class at. That small teams owns that product and that service. So they own product definition, product management, execution of it, gaining adoption both internally and externally. They have daily metrics, they have long-term metrics. And as soon as that service becomes kind of too big, too broad, guess what they do? They do the opposite of what every other team does, which is instead of rolling things up, they break things down. They'll split it into two teams, right? So there's separate services. And so that idea of creating essentially Lego blocks out of your business capabilities so that A, they can be owned by a team, a leader over a longer period of time. B, they can have a better sense of ownership. They can obsess about that capability, and they can have long-term ownership of it versus kind of this project launch and leave mentality that is part of the challenge when we're always trying to create change. So that's the two-pizza team model. So one of the great lectures I got from Jeff was in a big setting. We were launching the marketplace business, and he started to talk to me about like, well, how many new categories, how many new merchants have we launched? And I began to explain. I was like, well, Jeff, I only own kind of the merchant integration component of that. And Jeff said, John, I want you to listen to me carefully. John, you have allowed the simple things in our business to become the hard things in our business. Hard things should be hard, right? But you have to have wisdom. You have to recognize what hard things are, right? Simple things like the constraints that you're talking about, I expect you to think bigger than just your job title. I want you to think about running the marketplace business while also understanding you have a specific responsibility of merchant integration. And I think that mindset of having the wisdom to understand what are truly hard things in the business versus what are the things that really should be simple, and figuring out ways of pushing through those things that should be simple. So I have a client right now. We're working on kind of an innovation pipeline and portfolio, and we're at the point where we need to now be staffing some teams for some of the products and services that we want to be building. We're going to be doing it with some contingency and consulting labor, and we are being challenged with legal, with compliance, with procurement, with all of these things. And I keep telling them, if we get pulled to the board in a year and we're asked, why did we fail at kind of our innovation process? And we have to talk about like, well, because we couldn't hire the contingent capability we needed quickly enough, we should be fired because we have allowed the simple things in our business to become the hard things.